First of all, I would like to hear about refugees. What are the refugees? Because of the war, international borders look for refugees, and most of the times they are taking just one bag with few things inside, leaving back home, family, jobs, friends, everything. I'm covering these things for last 30 years, starting from war in Yugoslavia, Middle East, last 5 years in Greece. And what surprised me in this last one, first time in my life, I see refugees with taking their pets together with them. How they told me when I start photographing them, when I saw them first time, they told me we can choose taking between one more bag with clothes and some other things, or we can take our pet, which is already, we are looking him like it is member of family, not looking, it is member of family. So choosing between bag and pet, they are choosing, of course, pet. So um, I'm not so familiar talking. I'm a photographer. One photo, 1,000 words. I'm not so familiar talking about this, and I would like to tell you to suppose you wanted to hear our experience, people from the ground, how it goes, how it looks, what are we doing, how we are doing, what we did. When I went, when war started in Ukraine, I went to see what's going on. I saw a lot of refugees. I went there all 1 month after break of the war, and in that time I didn't have some assignment. I didn't have a plan what to do, what will I expect. I just have idea. Okay, refugees, war, hard situation, a lot of disorientated people, a lot of bad situations. Let's see what we can do, what we can show, what we can try to change. Because I believe that with photo we can change opinion, we can change how people thinking. Arriving to Poland, to Medica border, Poland and Ukraine, first thing what I saw was a lot of women, a lot of kids, not men at all, and a lot of pets, mostly dogs, cats, so few birds, one fish. And in that time, as I said, I didn't have some idea what I want to do. When I saw this animal with people, these refugees with animals, immediately it was unusual for me. For the first time, I see something like this.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks, Milos. I was actually just a bit of a transition here. I was really inspired by your work, Milos, when I was considering going over to Ukraine to work on this story. I saw your pictures and I was like, oh, okay, I have to be there. There's things going on that we need to share and show. So thanks for your work, man. Okay, so yeah, hi, I'm Thomas, and as Robin mentioned in my bio, yeah, I'm working on a long-term project called Sanctuary, which is about animal rescue all over the world. So what I'm working on doing is showing all the major issues that affect humans and animals through the perspective of the people who rescue them. So all the major issues and some of the hidden, not so thought about issues. But of course, war and conflict is one of the biggest things that affects humans and animals, or non-human animals together. And so I had some experience in Ukraine a few years before working on an animal rescue story. And so I wanted to go back and continue that, and then also just be with my friends who were there. So I will take you kind of through a bit of my experience. What I looked at was what I'm calling the animal rescue pipeline, which is basically the same. It's sort of a animal rescue refugee pipeline that runs within, or you could say parallel to, the human refugee pipeline. So probably some of this will be old information to you, or maybe new information to you, but what I want to show is this pathway from Western Europe into Eastern Ukraine and back. So right, again, we're looking at this animal rescue pipeline that's going from Medyka, Poland is where I started. And you're probably all familiar with this, but just to orient, what we're talking about is Medyka, Poland, here on the border of Poland and Ukraine, going into Lviv and on to Kyiv. And this isn't the exact route, of course, because things were changing all the time, but this is the area we're looking at. So basically an overview is that, as you know, people are volunteers and supplies coming in from Western Europe to the borders of all these countries. And then from there, people who were rescuing animals are bringing in supplies, usually, at least in my experience, to Lviv, where those supplies get dropped off and then redistributed throughout the country. Of course, some people were going farther into Ukraine to rescue animals and people and bring them back as well. And then, of course, people were coming out of Eastern Ukraine and Southeastern Ukraine along this route into Europe. So that's the orientation of kind of the route that I'm going to be showing photos from. So we're starting here in this, which was an impromptu animal aid camp where supplies were being dropped off. This is in Medyka, and it was set up by the Centaurus Foundation, which is a Polish foundation that does animal rescue, mainly equine rescue, but they have expanded to all animals. And so in this case, they set up this impromptu camp. When I arrived there, there were maybe like 13 or 15 shipping containers that supplies and volunteers were staying in and the animals were being housed in. But before that, it was just in these, this is an old like Soviet era, like farm cooperative. So the animals were being housed in there. And so this was like one of the main stopping points for volunteers to come in who were either working with the dogs and cats, walking them, cleaning cages, taking care of them. And one thing that really struck me, this is also my first time. I don't have as much experience as Milos does, so everything was new to me, but the sheer amount of logistical effort that goes into something like this was pretty incredible. So this is a lorry full of animal food that came in from Holland, and then all unloaded into the storage units here to be redistributed into Ukraine. This was also my first time seeing the combination of body armor and animal rescue, so that was a bit strange, but of course it makes sense in this case. And this is a group that was preparing to go to the area around Kyiv to rescue animals. And they spent about 3 days doing that and arrived early morning on the 4th day with over 40 dogs and cats that had been rescued. This is a couple from Estonia, and who I mainly spent my time with. They came down with their van and trailer to volunteer to bring food in and people and animals out. They're a great example of the kind of people, really from all over the world actually, that are showing up to help. And so now this next step is in Lviv. This is a family that this is pretty typical, right, of what's happening. And I really enjoyed the presentation beforehand. I had never heard the term multi-species family. I think I got that right. I'm still learning Spanish, so I think I got that. But this is, yeah, this is a multi-species family, and you know, an example of the things that affect animals affect us, and things that affect us affect animals. The cruelest part, perhaps, is that we do this to ourselves, or to each other, I should say. Another thing that struck me in this story is that this woman is an animal rescuer herself. So her 3 dogs are all rescues. And actually on the way out of Lviv, going back to Poland, they stopped to drop off supplies, and she and her kids helped, right? Drop off supplies and rescue more animals. This is at a sanctuary in Lviv called Dimsirka. So really, this is all so deeply intertwined. And actually, she was going on to Berlin, and the people she found to stay with were all through her animal rescue community. I think we all have a great idea now of why people are leaving Eastern Ukraine, and but at the time, you know, this was still really unsure. There's still air raids happening in Kyiv, and about half the population had left at this time already. But the danger of, you know, attack was still very real. This is one of those kind of hidden stories, something you don't think about, like the things we do to defend ourselves also end up hurting others. So in this case, this dog is being rescued from this tripwire sort of situation that was on the ground around a military base to keep people off of the sidewalk. And this dog ended up becoming entangled in it. And this group here that's rescuing her is the Kyiv Animal Rescue Group. And they have been doing really incredible work in animal rescue. I've seen them climb trees, go into sewers, go into basements, crawl through tiny cracks, climb on roofs to rescue animals. So the work they're doing is really nonstop. And the fact that this rescue would take them after curfew was no big deal to them. So this is to kind of show, you know, why people are leaving. I know it's kind of a weird thing to say. We all know why people are leaving, but the reality of it is that this is your neighborhood, right? This man's name escapes me right now, but he was walking. I mean, he's just walking his dog. This isn't an active animal rescue situation or anything like that, but he chose to stay with his multi-species family and was on the waiting list to volunteer for the territorial defense. But the reality of this situation is, you know, this horror is almost commonplace in the fact that it's right around the corner from your house. And lastly, I'll talk about the way out. So this is leaving Kyiv, back to Lviv, and then on to Europe. At this point, some people were coming back to Kyiv. This is the middle of March. So some people are coming back to Kyiv, some people are leaving Kyiv, some people are passing through Kyiv on the way to, you know, smaller towns where they lived. In this time, this was a few days before the liberation of Irpin and Bucha. So people had not quite come back to those areas yet. And this is little Daisy, this dog here. This is Daisy, and she's on her way out with her mom to stay in, I think she was going to Germany as well. I apologize, I have this written down, but it's some of the details are escaping me at the moment. But what I want to talk about here is, you know, this work, this Sanctuary Project has focused on sort of people doing extraordinary things during ordinary life to rescue animals, but the fact of animal rescue during war, especially during this one, is that everybody becomes an animal rescuer. Everybody's thrown into an extraordinary situation and has to do something above and beyond what they would normally do. And the thing that stands out to me within all of this, people doing rescue, no matter if it's during war or somewhere else, animal agriculture, all these things, the thing that stands out to me, and this strikes me with the Global Research Network too, is this is done out of love. And at the core of this, I think that's what we're really talking about, is how do we love each other and how do we love animals? And what do we do to alleviate suffering for them and for ourselves? So thank you very much.
Okay, we don't have so much time. Can you go to this photo where this old guy holding the dog, sitting behind his queue of refugees? Just scroll down. What I wanted to tell, and what was new for me, is that people in these situations are stressed. This one, okay, stop here. And they left their home. It is a war. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on with the members of family. But all these people who had pets, especially dogs, because cats were in boxes, cats were closed, they were calm. All of them, when I spent a lot of time looking at them, observing them, all of them were holding dogs, and somehow they also pets became quiet. Somehow I believe they understand something very bad is going on, something serious is going on. So I will stay next to human. He is taking me somewhere. We are in some very strange situations, and many humans are giving security to animals, and also these animals were giving security, and somehow these people were really calm, and you know, it was very, for the first time in my career I saw something like this. And this, for example, this old man, he was living around in the area of Kiev. Only thing what he took was his dog, his small dog, sleeping bag, and food for the dog. He didn't even took food for him because he knew that somewhere on the road he will find something to eat. But will he find for the dog? He didn't know, so he took food for the dog. Can we go to some photos of kids, Tom? For example, this small kid on the right, I don't remember his name. He has mouse. And he was spending time with his mouse playing, and it was this what I said. It was somehow they feel safe. They knew what's going on. They knew that they left their house. They knew everything, but this gave them security. Can you go to? I can talk about this a lot, but is there any questions? Is there something which, you know, these kind of situations are for me are kind of normal situation. All these not normal situations for us who are on the field are normal situations. So I don't know exactly what what you would like to hear from me on the field. Is there any questions? Is there something so I can explain? I'm a photographer, so making photos, this is my job. As I told, I believe that photo can change the way how people think, what they feel, what they think. For example, this young lady, this photo I did it first day, it was very, very cold. I don't remember, it was something around -10. People were queuing. It was still kind of chaos, not so well organized crossing. People are queuing. You can see faces on this photo, not exactly on the other photo. You can see faces. People are freezing. But she is holding her dog. None of them did let any pet on the ground because it is cold. And this is what they said: wherever I go, my pet is going with me. There is no separation. This is not my photo, but this is typical photo from the shelter. As I said, animals understand what's going on. In the shelter, they didn't move so far away, so much far away from their humans. They're always next to you. They feel, they know something is wrong, so we are together in this. Okay, this is one typical photo, same day. It is very cold and people are waiting for a bus to take them for a border crossing to Zemshil town. Same thing. It is cold. We don't have many things, but we are holding our pets, warming them, and taking care about them. And one of the reasons why I did this photo on the right, I was surprised. This lady, I don't know, I didn't talk with her, but she was sitting like this for more than 30 minutes. Something is wrong. I don't know, did she lost somebody or she received bad news? She was looking at fire, sitting. This small dog felt something is going on. He understands something bad is going on, and he was sitting like this, focusing on her like almost same time, almost same 30 minutes, like he was looking at the fire, lost somewhere in her thoughts. He was looking, she was looking at her like trying to help. The first time, it is because of the culture. Later I was thinking, all these things which I did before in the 90s in Yugoslavia war, there were no pets. I saw animals, livestock, but in the villages, people, they're leaving them free. They're fleeing from the villages because enemies coming and they're opening, they left all animals beside pigs. Pigs they killed or they keep closed because pig is eating everything. And there is a war, they are dead bodies. So to avoid these things, they were killing locals were killing pigs or just keep them closed. But all other animals, they let the free house, horses, cows, sheep, they let them free. They will survive. They're wandering around the houses, they have to eat grass, and they will survive. But this, then we have refugees from Middle East, different culture. They don't have pets, and they're going across the sea. So it didn't show them with the pets. Maybe 1 or 2 cats in 5 years of refugees from Syria, Iraq, Iran, and all in the Middle East. And now here in Ukraine, different people, different culture, a lot of pets, a lot of people with pets. And as I said, this was what this sentence, this lady, what she told to me, pet is the member, this dog is a member of the family. I can choose some belongings to take some things, some belongings. No, I taking my member of the family. He is going with me. And they were traveling for a lot. Some of them were traveling for 3 days from Kiev to border without food. They found food on water on the road, but together. All of them are together in that cold period. It was beginning the march, and it is cold in that time in north. It's cold.
So thanks again for the introduction. My name is Valentyna Vozna, and today we would like to present to you lessons learned from Ukraine, from the latest Russian war in Ukraine, and more specifically, the implications it had for the animals. I will very briefly present the work of the Eurogroup for animals. Then we will discuss the impacts of the Russia's war on animals in Ukraine. We'll present the emergency response which was provided by the EU and the international NGOs to animals of Ukraine. Then we'll briefly discuss the shortcomings which we've identified during the work of the task force. And in the second part of the presentation, my colleague Leah will present some ideas we're having about the emergency framework which could be put in place in the EU in order to better address animals in the disasters. So first of all, Eurogroup for Animals is a pan-European animal protection organization. Today, there are 85 members at the Eurogroup, and our projects vary from animals in science, animals in trade, companion animals, to wild animals. In the very beginning of the full-scale war of Russia on Ukraine, the Eurogroup and its members couldn't stay aside and convened a task force for Ukraine. So we've been following the situation on the ground in Ukraine very closely during the last 6 months, and we would like to present some of the findings. So on the screen, you can see now just a few examples of the impact the Russia's war in Ukraine left of the animals. All the animals are affected, and the war didn't leave anyone aside, really. The companion animals, the farm animals, as well as the wild animals in captivity. So there are already the known examples of the farm animals dying either from shelling or from hunger if they stayed for too long under the occupation. The same happened to the sheltered dogs in the Kiev region. And also, speaking of the zoos, there were 2 zoos bombed in Ukraine, and more specifically, the Feldman Eco Park in Kharkiv region. There were 100 animals which died, and as well as 5 workers. There were even known examples of the complete liquidations of fisheries. As for the ad hoc response which was provided by the EU and the NGOs to the animals of Ukraine, I would like to speak first of all about the one provided by the EU. So on the first day of the war in Ukraine, the European Commission called upon the member states and asked to derogate from the procedure about the non-commercial movement of animals into the EU. And indeed, the member states generally showed were very united, and all allowed refugees to come in with their pets, with up to 5 animals, without passports, without vaccinations, microchipping, or even the rabies antibody test. And it's important to specify here that unfortunately Ukraine is not a rabies-free country. On the other hand, there is a regulation about the commercial movement of animals, and animals such as sheltered animals, stray animals in Ukraine, and animals in zoos fall under this regulation. And unfortunately, there was no derogation offered by the EU for the commercial movement of animals. The NGOs, the international NGOs, generally were wanted to intervene on the ground and to help animals from the very beginning, but they were faced with a number of issues, such as very difficult logistics, no reliable partner on the ground in Ukraine, also no coordination between all of those NGOs channeling aid to Ukrainian animals. And very importantly, there was a real lack of the information about the real actual needs of the animals on the ground. So all this led to the creation of a UPAO platform, which is another ad hoc response to this war. UPAO stands for Ukrainian Pet Association Worldwide. It is a logistical platform which is meant to redistribute all the aid the NGOs are channeling to Ukraine among the animals in need all over the country. They have a web page where anyone from Ukraine, even the individuals in need, can go and request the aid for their animals. And we believe this is one of the really good examples of international NGOs working together with local community on the ground, which could be further replicated. UPAL has grown from just a few people in the very beginning of the war to 63 people today. We've also been able to identify some overarching challenges by different types of animals. For example, for wild animals in captivity, there were rescue centers ready to intervene and to evacuate the animals. But unfortunately, very often the reluctant owners of these animals in Ukraine were not willing to give up their animal. As for the companion animals, we see that there was a lack of information, awareness, and generally the preparation done by the owners. Very often we saw that some basic equipment necessary for evacuating companion animals was lacking, such as leashes and pet carriers. As for the farm animals, unfortunately, the response was difficult especially because of the intensive farming in Ukraine. But still, the NGOs have been channeling financial and animal feed resources to farm animals in Ukraine. So the main shortcomings which we've identified in the European emergency response to Ukrainian animals, we've divided into the three main areas. First of all, it's a lack of consideration of animals in humanitarian aid. There are two main regulations in the EU which govern the provision of humanitarian aid to people in a case of disasters. This is the EU Humanitarian Aid Regulation from 1996, which is exclusively aimed at people and unfortunately hasn't changed ever since. And the second one is the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, which has been developed a little bit later in 2001. And it does recognize the vulnerability of animals and wildlife in disasters, but it doesn't have to legally cover animals in terms of protection, unfortunately. And one of the main points about this mechanism is that it has to be requested by a country in a disaster. In case of Ukraine, it did activate the mechanism, but unfortunately in the wish list, they didn't request any aid for companion animals or for animals in the wild. The second area is the lack of the harmonized evacuation protocols. The evacuations have been happening, but on a very ad hoc basis, so without any coordination. And unfortunately, there was no specific criteria put in place for evacuating animals. Also, as I specified earlier, as part of the ad hoc response given by the EU, there was a derogation from the non-commercial movement of animals procedure, but unfortunately there was a great lack of the harmonization of this procedure among the member states, which significantly complicated the movement and especially the decision-making of the refugees for moving in different countries in the EU. The third area is the lack of appropriate infrastructure in the EU. So according to IFOR and the Polish veterinary authorities, in the early weeks of the war, there were up to 600 animals crossing only the Polish border daily. So such a great influx of animals into the European countries very quickly revealed the issue with the accommodation for these animals. And the issue was basically threefold. First of all, there was a lack of pet-friendly refugee camps. Secondly, the legislation of some EU countries doesn't allow refugees to be in social housing together with their pets. And thirdly, there was no facilities for the quarantining of the animals. Thank you. Now I would like to pass the presentation to my colleague, Léa. Yeah, Léa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valentyna. Yes, so indeed, after seeing all the challenges that were presented by Valentyna, we can think of the possible responses. So we had discussions with the European associations representing with the high standard facilities, so high standard zoos and rescue centers, EASA and EAS, and they were quite successful at delivering aid and also evacuating animals, so we could identify some good practices. So first, they have well-established networks that really communicate regularly and form a community, so it makes the exchange of information a lot easier. Second, they have national associations that can really efficiently coordinate actions within the country, and it was the case in Ukraine. And also when an animal is evacuated, there is a definitive transfer of responsibility. So it avoids additional administrative burden for the return of the animal and also stress for the animal that would have to be transported again. They also have very good records of the animals they care for with very precise information, which is very helpful to coordinate specific aid and also evacuations, of course. And finally, they have already programs in place to exchange animals, so they could really build on this for the evacuations and, for example, with quarantine facilities. Next slide, please. So based on the challenges and the lessons learned, Eurogroup for Animals supports the creation of a coordination mechanism and a response framework in the European Union that would enable to be better prepared to respond to emergency situations in the EU, as well as border countries, and ensure that efforts are well distributed. So such a framework could be used for different types of situations, not only for war, and we see the need for it because we have more and more natural disasters, as we have seen during the summer. So it could include different things. Here are some ideas. So it could propose guidance on the roles and responsibilities of each stakeholder so that everyone would know what they can do step by step. It could also propose harmonized procedures and criteria for animals evacuations. So for instance, socialization, so that pets that are evacuated are the ones that can be adopted, which is a real issue. It could also include recommendations for simplified procedures, because, for instance, confiscated animals do not belong to rescue centers, at least for a while. And that complicates a lot their evacuation, so that could be addressed. We could also create some platforms so that all stakeholders can regularly exchange and slowly build a community that can be activated when there is a need. And we could also think of a fund or equipment reserves that would enable really rapid responses. In terms of priorities, aid to the disaster or war area is really the priority and the basis of every action. Yet it's important to prepare for eventual evacuations and harmonize entry requirements when we deal with situations outside the EU, as was the case for Ukraine. And finally, as a last resort, we could evacuate facilities under the condition that there is enough capacity to welcome these animals in the EU. So in terms of next steps, it would be interesting to initiate a dialogue between the EU institutions, animal welfare and humanitarian NGOs, or even environmental NGOs to address wild animals, national authorities, including veterinary services, and also the practitioners, such as managers of shelters, as well as animal owners. Immediate next steps could be the creation of an EU registry of NGOs and local actors or experts, keeping in mind that although we could have a global emergency response mechanism or framework, disasters are best managed locally, so it needs to really adapt to local conditions. And also an easy step would be that the national veterinary services should be involved in the development of national disaster management plans so that animals are included. So feel free to contact us. Here are our contact details, and you can also follow Eurogroup's work on social media. So yeah, in the next slide, yeah. So yeah, you can follow also what we do on Ukraine in the social media. So thank you for listening, and also thank you for the organizers for organizing this symposium. And we are available for questions. Thank you.